the co-author of this book, published book. You're getting red. Did you get sun today? Roberta is fantastic, and I have loved getting to know her and work with her. But she has, and my goodness, see all these binders and book on the CCC camps, and this is she's going to donate to, as well as this book. It's all in a section of the library back there in the bookcases in the CCC section. So if you have family that was involved in the CCC, then this information here is going to tell you where you can get more information, more about the camps around here. And tonight we're going to learn all sorts of interesting things about the CCC, why it was uniquely important, and what life was like if you were in a CCC camp, amongst many other things. So without any further ado, Roberta Toby.
Thank you, John. I want to welcome everybody here. I see a bunch of new faces. And I want to also thank John for helping me with getting this presentation ready. And so we're going to be talking about the CCC camp, also called the Civilian Conservation Corps camp, or the Tree Army. We call it the Tree Army. And how it got started when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president in 1932, it was clear to him that something drastic had to be done about unemployment, abuse, and the waste of natural resources. And then you all know the stock market crashed in 1929 and the country fell into a deep depression. And many people, including the men that was in World War I, they were without jobs, and the country was really hurting and people were starving. And 2 days after his inauguration on March the 4th, 1933, I think that's, I noticed that date is different from what it is now. It's in January now, isn't it? When they take, it says March the 4th, 1933. And he called a meeting to high government officials to create a Civilian Conservation Corps, also known as the CCC or the Tree Army. In his first 100 days, he created the Conservation Corps, the Federal Emergency Relief Act, the National Industrial Recovery Act, and dozens of other programs. And the first CCC camp was in Virginia. And the Crawford County for CCC camp was located 4 miles north of English on the right side of the road where Nolan Barnett's store used to stand. If any of you know where that was at, there's a metal gate there now just north of where the store was. On the right hand side of the road, I think it's a red gate, and right there's where they went into the camp. And it was known as CCC Company 2583 F5. And in 1935, English had offered them land down here in the English Park, but the Forest Service, which is out of Bedford, they bought the land from Mr. Barnett. And this site consisted of 9 and 5,600 acres in section 31 south of range 1 west. The deciding factor was a large spring was there that they thought would be able to provide water for more than 200 men. It was the camp was in the Mitchell sector of Fort Benjamin Harrison District, 5th Corps area. And Camp 2583 was established by some workers from Company 1536 at Mitchell. 23 men arrived from Mitchell on July the 19th, 1935 to prepare the place for a 200-man camp. The first day, they erected a mess tent, an officer's tents, more than one, a hospital, and a cook's tent. The construction crew was occupied about a month before the enlisted men arrived. These men later built the barracks, along with some 15 or 20 local men who were experienced in construction, carpentry work, whatever they needed, as straw bosses.
Should we have pictures of the camp now?
Yeah. And have you already showed them the store?
Yeah.
Okay, can we go back to that store picture just a second?
Sure. There.
Okay, they used to call that building an old roadhouse, so I always heard it was called a roadhouse. And I think it's kinda like an inn for people that's traveling.
Now this was at, right where Zoo Road.
Yeah, right there on the
That's all,
corner,
right?
right there on the corner of Zoo Road and Phillips Road.
Mhm.
And that's Mr. Barnett on the left, and that's his three children, Garnet, Glenn, and Earl. And I always was just amazed at her name, Garnet Barnett. Yeah, Garnet Barnett. And I used to babysit for Glenn and his wife a little bit. And I used to walk up there to the store to get stuff and carry it back down over the hill to the house. And they were very good people. And, these are there was tents they built, I guess those were the first thing. And those, they're barracks, and this one here is called an oil house. And, the creosoted poles, there was a field across the road from the store, and nothing would ever grow there. And I always figured that's where they had the creosote plant at, for the creosote, those poles. They finally are getting it now where stuff can grow in there, but it took a long, long time. And on July 23rd, 1935, 162 new enrollees arrived at the camp. Well, first, I gotta tell you, an enrollee in the CCC, they had to be from a relief family at first, and then they later on changed that. I think they changed that in like 1937. Yeah, in 1937, they changed that rule where they didn't have to come from a relief family. And they had to be between 17 and 23 years of age, unmarried. They must have dependents or be unemployed. And I thought, well, how can they be unmarried and have dependents unless maybe they was divorced? Maybe, I don't know. But that was the rules to be able to be in there. And you had to be a U.S. citizen. You had to be taller than 60 inches and less than 78 inches, and you had to weigh more than 107 pounds. And then on July 23rd, 1935, 162 new enrollees arrived at the camp, swelling the camp to 185 boys. And on July 29th, the full quota of 206 was filled. The boys were living in tents and were put to work at once, clearing off the site for permanent buildings, which would include 5 barracks, a recreation hall, an administrative building, officers' quarters, foresters' quarters, a mess hall, and an educational building. Drilling began on July 29th on the first of 3 wells to be sunk at the camp. And a water tank was erected, and the camp would have its own light plant. The spring was providing sufficient water, but it was too muddy to use after a hard rain. And plans were already made to locate a second camp there if they could find enough water. They drilled a well to 350 feet, but there was no water found. And the contract was just for 315 feet to be drilled. And they was pumping water from the spring into a 2,000-gallon reservoir tank on the highest part of the hill. That would be more closer to the Orange County line. And on August the 27th, pilings for foundations of the buildings were placed, but progress was halted for a bit when the well failed to show water. Then they continued drilling a little later on, and the carpenters carried the project almost to completion of the infirmary and 2 barracks. 10 working days had most of the buildings ready to use. Then on August the 30th, 1935, 54 new enrollees arrived, which made 235 beds. That was a big camp. And on September 19th, 1935, Captain Guy Hoover, who he was from the Mitchell area, that camp, those men that came from Mitchell, he was the commanding officer down here then. He announced that the men would move out of their army tents and into the newly constructed buildings. Then they asked teachers and anybody that knew how to you know, they build buildings, do any kind of construction trades, people that knew how to show those boys how to do trades. They asked them to volunteer to come up there and help out at the camp. And, they had, some of these boys didn't have any education at all when they came there, and they taught them a lot. Some of the classes they had were shorthand, typing, accounting, electronics, chemistry, taxidermy, bookkeeping, barbering, handcrafts, mechanical weaving, spelling, sociology, truck driving, architectural drawing, and botany. And Kenneth Patton, some of you will remember him from, he ran a store here in English. He offered to give instruction in mathematics, including algebra and plane geometry. And some other classes were first aid, forestry, auto mechanics, radio, American history, and literacy. The camp had to use a direct current generator for their electricity since no line had been built from English. And the government wouldn't justify the expense of putting the line up unless several farmers that lived between English and up there would agree to have their houses wired. And so that didn't happen. By September 1935, 12 major buildings were completed, and plumbing was installed in the hospital. See, they even had a hospital. A mess hall and officers' quarters, and heated water was available in the bathhouse. Those barracks were 150 feet long, and they were heated by 3 large furnaces, and each provided quarters for 52 men. On December 13th, 3 new buildings were completed. So that made, 15 buildings? Yeah, that's 15 buildings. And these 3 extra buildings were an 11-car garage, a 24 by 50 foot warehouse, and a 12 by 20 oil house. These men were paid $30 a month, and that's equivalent to about $600 nowadays. But they only were allowed to keep $5. The rest they had to send as an allotment to someone else, or someone in their family, or they could send it to themselves, and the government would give them money on discharge. They usually sent it to their parents, and I'm sure this went a long way in helping their parents to feed their brothers and sisters and survive the Depression.
Would you like to go ahead and show the slides of Wyandotte and Clifton Falls?
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of camps in Indiana. And this here is the camp at Oregon. This is a colored camp. They did segregate these men. They was either all white camps or all colored camps, or even had Indian camps.
So in the forestry, when we see those, for instance, the sculpture, the floor that has the Indian chief in it, this is the CCC camp that made that, right?
Yeah, they built those shelter houses in there, and well, we'll talk about the firehouse later, but,
Yeah, the whole group camp there was their barracks at one time. I mean, it's been refurbished, but that's where they encamped at the group camp there.
Where was that?
The group camp in O'Bannon Woods was the camp for that CCT company. And it was not only a black, Negro, it was the largest and longest lasting CC company in the nation.
Well,
The largest black.
this photo here was given to me by Lee Cable, and some of you will probably remember he used to do the articles in the Clarion. He asked me one day, he said, would you like to have this picture? And I said, sure. And so.
And it's the picture that's back there on the back wall. Now, the other picture, which was inside there, is this picture, and this is the Tell City, the William Tell camp at Tell City. It's normally hanging in the room over there. And let's see, let's do.
And that is the camp that used to be up here. We'll get to that later, but.
Yeah. And this is Clifty Falls CCC camp. And I threw this in for personal reasons because the person second from the right there is Ray Staniford, my grandfather. He was an instructor in that camp. But you can see the camps look very similar.
Okay. these camps were run, military style. Everything was the government's, their shoes, their soap, their sheets, their clothes, their trucks, everything. They were run by officers who had served in World War One. They had reveille and lights out, just like they were in the regular army. No drinking was allowed on the premises, nor any alcohol at all. Nor any alcohol allowed on the premises. They had to pay out of their allowance to have their clothes cleaned or have someone else to do it for them. They could buy cigarettes, shoe polish, candy, and so forth from the canteen, and the money from the canteen went back to the company for the benefit of the whole camp. A chaplain came to the camp on Sundays, and those of Catholic faith were driven to Mitchell. 80% of the men attended services. Those who had been trained in cooking and baking prepared the meals for the men. They had good food, and almost all the men gained an average of 12 pounds. Well, through that depression, they were probably getting pretty hungry, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
you'll see the menu in a second.
Yeah.
We'll see why they gained weight.
They were issued clothing of an Army enlisted man, but altered in style. The olive drab uniform soon became a common sight throughout the country. Their work uniform was blue denim, and the denim work hat, became famous in the Corps. Each man was issued a number, just like a dog tag that the Army men had. These men had a number. It was imprinted on a metal disc, and it was kept on their person until their discharge. And that was their serial number. They belonged to the government 24 hours a day. They could only leave camp after work hours and with permission from company commanders. After 6 months, you were entitled to 6 days of leave with pay. The government didn't pay for your transportation to go anywhere. And it was prohibited to hitchhike or jump on a freight train. So I guess they had a hard time getting back to where they wanted to go. They were allowed with permission to go to town to movies or dance halls, libraries, and etc. There was also a library at each camp. The English camp had 450 selections. They played baseball with the other camps from the other counties or surrounding counties. And the recreation hall had radios, pool tables, ping pong tables, card tables, and chairs for reading and writing. Classes were in the evening after work and supper. Camp 2583 had their own newspaper. And here's copies of it. I was searching for this camp, and I found that the Center for Research Libraries, they had microfiche of these newsletters that those men made. So I sent off and got that microfiche. And then I made a whole bunch of trips to Tell City to get where they had a thing where I could put them on the machine, like, you know, and see what they were and print them off. So I made several trips down there and done that, 10 cents a page. Yeah.
Big investment, thank you.
Yeah, and, so I'm glad we had those though. There's a lot of men's names mentioned in there, and it tells like who won the ball games and what all they did, and they got jokes in there, and, like little recipes and all kind of different things. And when these men were enrolled, they were usually sent to another county or another state. And I think the reason with that was so they wouldn't get homesick and run back home. I know my dad was in the CCC camp, and he was from the mountains of Kentucky, Morgan County, Kentucky. And he was sent to Danville, Kentucky, and that's where he met my mom. And just yesterday over in the archives looking for some more stuff, and I found where his brother was, you know, from the same place in Morgan County. He wound up all the way in Idaho. And I had another step uncle, that's where he was sent to. He was sent to Idaho. And Richard Eastridge's dad was, he was in Idaho too, wasn't he? He was somewhere out there.
You said that, yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of the men, Bill's grandfather, great-grandfather, Bill's great-grandfather, Ralph Dearborn, he was sent to Tell City, and then he went somewhere else for 7 days, and then he was sent out west too. I think he went to Idaho too. It tells in this book, I have an interview with him in here in this book. And he says he entered it, and he was when he was 16 years old, but the rule was you had to be 17, so, and another guy, he said he went when he was 15. So those guys had to fib a little, but I guess they was getting hungry and they wanted to get in there. The job, some of these jobs the Ben did, they greatly helped our country. And they planted 2 billion, I don't know how they come up with this exact number, but it said they planted 2,356,000,000 trees. Yeah, that's a lot of trees. They built telephone lines, roads, they erected fire towers. There was 3 of them in Crawford County. One was the Spears Tower at Jericho, there's one at Alton, and there's the Buzzard Roost Tower. And, of course, there used to be one at 37, just north of, Pine Valley. And I have the one in Harrison Forest, I think it's still there, the one in Harrison Crawford Forest. And they called them lookout towers instead of fire towers. We call them fire towers, but they were lookout towers. And they manned those towers, and they fought forest fires, they built ponds and reservoirs, they built truck trails, and I guess that was so if they had a fire in the woods, they could get to the fire. Soil erosion, they built campgrounds, Spring Mill Park and the Crawford Harrison Forest, those boys fixed those parks up. And they built shelter houses, habitats for fish, soil erosion control, they did some surveying, rock quarry work, road construction. They helped with disasters, especially in the 1937 flood. And insect and varmint control and many, many other things. They kept them busy and they did an awful lot of work for our country and our county. The English camp continued to have water problems, so it was torn down and moved to Del City, just north of town on Highway 37. It's a mile and a half north of Del City on the left-hand side as you're going into Del City. That's where they moved it to. But there was already a camp there, but they just joined them. And, by December 31st, 1940, the buildings were all taken down and they were moved there to Del City. And, it was known as F9. It kept the same number, 2583, but I think it was then called F9 instead of F5. And, that lumber some of the lumber, when they tore those buildings down, they built, I know they built one house in a post office. A Parks family, it's in our book here, it tells in this book here about the Parks family, they built their own home and a post office. And, when World War II, it soon broke out right after this, it was in 1941 when the World War II broke out, and these men were already pretty much prepared to serve in the military because they were, had been living military style. I guess all they had to learn how to do was shoot and whatever else they had to learn. But they were pretty well prepared for the military. And my dad, he went in, but he didn't go in until 44. I think it was 43 or 44 he went in. And, he served in the Philippines, and he got a Purple Heart. But all this, I think this really helped those guys. It took those boys and made men out of them. And it helped their families and our country greatly. They got an education, and they learned a trade or more than one trade. And if any of you if you had a relative that served in a CCC camp, there's places you can get their information if you would like to. It's in this green binder here, and I've got it wrote down here. I'm going to stick this inside of this book here. But
when I was, trying to find out about my dad, they had me to call, a guy named, Gene Morris. And it has his phone number here, but that's been many years ago. So the phone number probably still works, but it's probably someone else in charge by now, but maybe not. And then you can also get information from St. Louis. And if I can remember, he sent me a form to fill out, and then I sent it on to St. Louis, and then I got my information from my dad. And it tells you what kind of diseases they had, you know, sicknesses, if they was in the hospital, if they got in trouble, which my dad did. And, but it's just, and it tells you their height and their weight, and it even shows a drawing of their body, and if they got any scars or anything that notable that need to be shown, they show that on there. I think it's really neat, so some of you might wanna send off and get that information. But,
Let's show the menu, Thanksgiving menu.
oh, yes.
Here it is.
You notice down at the bottom of that menu, can you see down there where it says they got cigarettes on the menu? Yeah, they fed them pretty good. Look, they had roast turkey, oyster dressing, creamed asparagus, lettuce salad, cranberry sauce, mixed fruit, candied sweet potatoes, mixed nuts, they had candy, mashed potatoes, giblet gravy, pickles, pumpkin pie, ice cream, butter and bread, and coffee and cigarettes. So that was really a good meal there.
Makes us all hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it for the slides.
Okay.
You done?
Okay, want to, this book here that Richard and I put together several years ago, we, got help from the Forestry Service at Bedford. We have some pictures in here that, the lady up there, the lady up there, we have quite a few pictures in here. And the lady up there, she was a great help, her name was Tina Ligman. She helped us with putting this together. We have pictures in here and a lot about that, and there's some of the newsletters, a few of them in here. But those, rest of them are all there, and it's very interesting just to go through them and read them. And I'm donating this folder here. It tells about all the different camps in Indiana, and, there are some, information on other camps. And there's a lot of newspaper articles in here that, from the Democrat, telling the men's names, and, there's several pages here of newspaper articles. If somebody might find their family name in these articles here. If you didn't know for sure if your relative was in there, you can look through here and you might be able to find. But some of them, like a lot of them that was from around here, they sent other places. But somebody might have some information to help you out to find out where they were. But, everything I got, that I gathered up, I put it in that book or these folders, and so I'm contributing this to the society. And I hope you guys will come in and look at this sometime. Here's a list of, all the CCC camps that was in Indiana. It's this whole page and a part of another page. That many CCC camps were in Indiana. And,
Could each
So-
county have one?
pardon?
Could each county have a CCC camp?
I don't know if every county did, but, I can't tell you that. We'd have to count all these and see how many there is. I don't know if there's 92 there, it might be.
What is close?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I'd say pretty much every county had one. Cause see, all these things they did, these counties needed that, and these boys needed money and something to do to keep them out of trouble and to help themselves and their families. And I think that was a great thing that president did, really a great thing.
What was the length of stay?
Pardon?
What was the average length of stay that a man stayed?
I don't know that. think probably maybe 2 years, but I'm not know for sure. I didn't run across that anywhere.
Didn't either.
I
Good
need-
question though, yeah.
You know, but I could look on my dad's, the stuff I got and see where when he went in and when he got out, and maybe could go from that.
Did
The
they
world-
leave at any time they wanted, or did they have to have a formal process where they were dismissed?
I don't know.
Well, I think from what I've read from your books, Roberta, that they couldn't leave any time. As a matter of fact, they, as Roberta said, they purposely didn't want them to leave. They put them in places where they couldn't walk home, as Roberta said. So I think they signed up for a specific period of time. But when World War II came along, all of a sudden, that was the end of CCC because all those boys were needed for the war effort.
I also want to tell you, we have a whole bunch of Kentucky Explorer magazines back here on the shelf. And I was looking through there one time, and, through one of them, because I donated those to the society. There's talking about the CCC camp at Danville, Kentucky. And this guy, Delbert Honchel, he always put the puzzle in there. Every month he had the puzzle in there, and it was about that CCC camp, and I looked, and there was my dad's name. Well, I got a hold of him, and he sent me a great big picture of my dad, a big picture of my dad. He knew my dad. I didn't know my dad, but he did. And, oh, that was so nice of that man to send that to me. And he's, let's see, I think I've got a picture of him in one of these, in here, he's in here somewhere. Yeah.
Are there any, alphabetical lists of the ones that were in camps in Indiana?
No,
I had an uncle that was in the CC camp, but I don't know if he got to stay in Indiana.
yeah, if you have, do you have anybody older than you that would maybe know that you could contact?
Not anymore.
I don't know, but you could, if you get time, you can come and go through these things in here and see if you can find them in there. And,
If you're local, in the back of this book Roberta wrote, there is a list of names here, an index, so.
the ones that are in it,
Local,
they're in here too.
May I also say that the author of this book is available for sale, and the author of this book just might sign it for you. The other thing I'll suggest is if you buy a copy, or whether you buy a copy or not, be sure and sign up and become a member of the Historical Society, right?
Yes,
We want you all. Are you done with your presentation?
yes.
Roberta?
If anybody has any
Oh,
questions.
you have another question?
How much different WBA and CCK?
They're two different organizations.
They're about the same time, I wonder.
They were part
I
of
don't know, really. I'd have to
Carl
check on that.
Chandler, he was in WBA.
Well, Carl Chandler was in here too. He was in the CCC. Yeah.
He was in WBA. He said he drove a van around, pick people up, take them in there.
I think we have an interview with him in here.
Might be.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think he's got, his interview's in here, and, and Ralph, Bill's great grandfather he's got an interview in here. We interviewed a few of the guys that was from Crawford County, so they're in this book. Ursula Lou, and Virgil Satterfield, and Ralph Dearborn, Aiden Knight, anybody knows been for Aiden Knight,
I don't
Lloyd
never
Goldman,
heard of the Anderson.
Ralph. Yeah, Carl Chandler, he was in the CCC camp too, he's in this book.
He told me he drove for WBA.
Well, it's all in here. Oh, yes, go ahead.
You know, was there a process for the men to be selected? I heard the qualifications, but
Well, just, they had to be
Them to be chosen?
between 17 and 23.
yeah, I
And
heard.
they had to be, they had to weigh more than 107 pounds.
So anyone who met those qualifications and showed
I
up,
think so.
Alright.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, cause they was needing those boys for the camps, and
They was doing, the president intended to help our country, and he was helping those guys at the same time, and their families, and all of us, really. Cause those trees they planted, some of them probably still growing today. And,
Well, it really helped the infrastructure, didn't it?
yes, the roads, some of the roads they built, we've probably been riding on those, and, like, you know,
Yeah,
it's.
the Indiana State Park System wouldn't be what it is today without the CCC, because they did a majority of that infrastructure work
Yes,
in all of our state parks, so. And Indiana has some of the best state parks in the country.
Is there any of, like, their buildings or anything left still standing that we know of?
any what?
Any of their buildings or anything like that still left
Yeah,
standing?
those shelter houses down there. The shelter houses in O'Bannon, Harrison Crawford Forest, they call it O'Bannon, Louisville. Those shelter houses and those trails, and that fire tower. That's what they built those. Mhm.
In Mingo, along the creek in what we call the old town, all those walls, stone walls,
Oh, there where you go over that little bridge that curves, right?
it's not in town, it's in the old town, where we're redoing the old church,
Oh, okay.
and along the stream, those sandstone walls were all along the edge of the creek.
Oh, it's hold back the creek?
Well, to hold back the
Keep it
walls,
from eroding and
the
all
creek
that?
from coming, yes, but a lot of them have been washed away.
Yep.
And, people have got them up out of the creek and used them.
Well, I wish myself personally that they would bring something like that back again. They got all these people just sleeping in tents and cardboard boxes, why couldn't they make them feel proud about themselves and make something out of themselves, help them out?
My dad was in the CCC camp, but I think he was stationed at Cal City. But he spoke to Caswell English.
Yeah, well, see, this one here did go to Tell City. This camp was up here.
No,
I
think he was
did
in
go to
Cal
Tell
City
City.
camp.
So your dad may be in this picture, and there's a list of names up here at the top too. So you may find him.
Anybody else?
Roberta,
Anybody else have a
A lot of
question?
young ladies in English at the time, and I remember at least two of them, or three, that married the CC boys. One of them was a cousin of mine, Doris Roberts, married a guy named Gray Whiteside. And John Blevins had 3 daughters, and I know at least one of them, and maybe 2 married the CC boys. And I used to have a mail route, and I stopped at Webb Trustee's store there in West Fork. And he liked to talk about it because he was in the CC camp. And, you showed a picture of Logan Barnett's store and the 3 children. And when I was a kid, that was, known kind of another name. I think he maybe, early in the 20s, he might have sold a little liquor there in the store. They call it the Roadhouse. And of the 3 kids that he had, one of them was ahead of me in school. He played the basketball team, and I did too. And when you hit 18, less than a month ago, you were in service. And we had a county attorney coming up. And Glenn Barnett was kind of known as Butch.
Yeah.
He had to leave and go to the army in the morning. We had the county attorney, we played 2 games. So one of the guys, Pete Lever or something, said, let's win this one for Butch. And so Branco was the biggest team in the county, and we shut them out the first half. We beat them, and we beat Leavenworth.
I wanted to say that Ferdinand Forrest, that was done with the CCC boys too. And the Aiden Knight, his interviews in this book here, he was there. He was at the Ferdinand, down there at that CCC camp.
Well, we better wrap up so we can do the business part of the meeting, but afterwards, I bet, Roberta, you'll still be around for a few minutes, right?
Mhm.
Roberta, thank you very much.